everyone, welcome back to another episode of So Simple with Miss Sarah. This time we're going to learn how to make these really awesome stuffed turkeys. They're super fun and they're super easy to make. So let's get started and let's look at what supplies we'll need. So to make our turkey, we're going to need at least 4 different colors of felt. So you're going to want to have a yellow, a brown, an orange, and a red. Those are at least the colors I used in this video. You can use whatever colors for your turkey that you'd like. You will also need some embroidery thread. It's just an example. This is just white thread. You can use any color. So you can use the colors that match your turkey, or you can do colors that contrast with it. You will also need an embroidery needle and a pin. The pin is optional because pins are very sharp and they're much smaller than the needles that we're going to be using. So they can be a little bit more tricky and dangerous. So only use a pin if you feel very comfortable, or if your parent said it's okay. You will also need something to mark up your pattern with. So I'm going to use a water-soluble ink pen, which basically means that this will disappear with water, so it's washable. It also disappears over time with air because it's kind of a fancy little pen. You don't need something this fancy though to mark it up. You can just use a pencil, using some chalk. But I have this, so I'm going to use this. You will also need a pair of scissors. We're going to do a little bit of gluing this time, so I've got some tacky glue. If you don't have tacky glue, just liquid Elmer's glue or whatever kind of liquid glue you have will work, just not a glue stick. It's going to be a little hard to pick it up, but we're going to add some googly eyes. And lastly, you'll need a little bit of stuffing because we're going to make our turkey a little bit plump and we're going to stuff him. So let's get started and cut out all of our pieces for our turkey, and then we can start sewing. To get started, I went ahead and I traced my pattern onto all of my felt pieces. The pattern I used I provided in the description below, so it has the shapes for the body and all the various wing sizes. So the pieces though for some of the body parts, like the feet, are very, very tiny. The nose is super tiny, I dropped it. The nose is really tiny, and the little wheeler, which is a little red thing on a turkey, is also really tiny. So I went ahead and I cut those pieces off camera just because I was going to have to get them much closer to my face to see and be a little bit more precise when I was cutting. For the little red part of the turkey, right by his nose, any kind of cylinder shape will do, so it does not have to be perfect. So anything you can kind of muster together when you're cutting it out will work for this piece. But for the rest of the pieces, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut them out for real now. So I want you guys to go ahead and trace your pattern pieces and cut them out as well. Now that we have all of our pieces cut out, we're going to get ready to start sewing. So we're going to work on 1 layer at a time, so you can put our 2 bigger layers down for now, and we're just going to work with our smallest layers, whatever color you made that, and our turkey body. And we'll add all the details at the end. So what we're going to need to do first is we're going to need to thread and stitch the turkey body onto the first feather layer. So we're going to want to find a brown thread that matches our turkey, or you can use whatever color you want. I'm going to use brown, so I'm going to show you guys how to thread your needle so that we can get started on sewing. All right, let's get started on our stitching. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to thread our needle. So I went ahead and I made a long string of brown to sew my turkey body, and I have my needle, which is my embroidery needle. So I'm going to take one end of my thread and I'm going to put it through the eye of my needle. Which can be a little tricky, so it can take some practice. Might take you a few tries. Embroidery needles are a little easier just because the eye is a lot bigger than a normal sewing needle. Then you're going to want to match up the 2 ends of your thread. So I'm going to pull the excess out. I'm going to take my 2 ends and I'm going to try to match them up so they're just about even. They might not be perfect, but it doesn't have to be. Just as close to even as you can get the 2 ends to be. And then you're going to want to tie a knot. You can tie this knot however it's easiest for you. For me, I like to wrap it around my finger. Makes a little loop. I pull my 2 ends through that loop and I pull it tight to get a knot. You can do that one more time just to double knot it. Try your best to line that knot up again so that when you pull, both of your knots kind of line up on top of each other. And there you go. you have a big knot, and now your needle is ready. And this little bit of a long bit after that knot, you don't really need it, so you can cut that tail end off close as you can get to your knot. My scissors aren't too sharp, so they're a little dull. All right, and now we are ready. So the kind of stitching that we're going to do on our turkey is called the running stitch. So let me grab my example. So on our example turkey, I did the running stitch across his body. And even though we're stuffing our turkey, which did leave a little bit of gaps in some places because I made my stitches too long apart, because he's going to be more for a decoration than a toy, I'm going to do the running stitch around him. If you're going to play with your turkey more than you're just going to display him, maybe do a back stitch on this part. And if you want to learn how to do a back stitch, if that's a new term to you, I'll link the video down in the description below on how to make a back stitch. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to do running stitches. So I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start off from the back. So we're going to start off from the yellow or whatever color your first feather layer is. And we're going to bring our needle up right from the back and through the brown. So it goes through the brown and the yellow. And then you're going to pull the needle all the way so that the thread gets trapped and it hits the back of the yellow. And don't worry about seeing all this stitching right now because it's going to get covered later on. And then to make our stitches, to make our running stitches, we're just going to kind of move a little bit forward. So all we have to do is find a little space above where that first stitch is sticking out and poke our needle through. So again, it goes through the brown and the yellow, and then pull the needle all the way so that the thread gets nice and tight. You don't want to pull it too tight because you don't want everything to warp around itself, but tight enough that there's nowhere else that the thread can go. And now we just repeat the process. Now our thread is sticking out from the back, which means our needle has to come up from the back. So going up again a little bit past this point, so maybe about here, we're going to stick our needle up and pull it through all the way until there's no more thread that can't be pulled through. And that is how you do a running stitch. It's very simple. And if you ever get confused on which direction your needle has to go, always look at what side of the thread your thread tail is sticking out. So my tail is sticking out of the front of my turkey, which means my needle needs to continue going from the front. So I'll pick a spot again, a little bit of ways ahead of where I just left off, poke my needle through, and pull all the way until there's no more tail left. And now my tail's sticking in the back, which means my needle has to come from the back this time. So pick a spot a little bit ahead and poke your needle through. And if you end up pulling too tight so that everything kind of warps like that, gets a little wrinkled, you can just loosen it up, give it a little tug, pull it free, and you're good to keep sewing. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna continue stitching my running stitch almost all the way around my turkey. I'm gonna leave this bottom area right here open because I'm gonna use that point to stuff my turkey afterwards with some of that stuffing I showed you earlier so that we can turn our turkey into a plushie. So I want you guys to try to go around your turkey with your running stitch, but remember, leave an opening somewhere, wherever you feel like is a good spot for you. Okay, at this point I've made it to the edge, so I'm going to remove the pin I was using and put that aside, and I'm going to grab my little bag of stuffing. So you don't need quite this much stuffing. This is a lot for our tiny little turkey, but being very careful of where I put my pin down and where I put my needle. I'm going to open up my turkey and I'm going to start filling him with my stuffing. And since he's a tiny opening, it can be a little tricky, especially to get it all the way up. So if you want to use your pen that you had or your pencil or anything you have, just kind of push the stuffing up so it gets all the way to his head and it fills in every little nook and cranny. And it's nice and tight. And then just fill him up, fill your turkey plushie just as much as you want. It doesn't have to be super stuffed, it can be kind of soft. I think mine a little bit firm, so I'm going to fill him up extra stuffed. Once you're satisfied with how full he is, we're going to finish up that stitching along whatever area you left open. So in my case, I'm going to finish stitching along the bottom. So remember, whatever side your tail was sticking out of is the side you need to bring your needle through. So my tail is sticking out of the back, so I need to bring my needle up and through both layers of fabric from the back. Be very mindful of where your fingers are, because at this point you're going to have to kind of hold that closed. You can use your pin again if you want. I'm just going to use my hands right now and just be careful of my needle. So just like that, our first layer is done. I'm not going to put on my turkey's facial features yet, so I'm not going to glue his eyes, his mouth, or his feet yet, just because while I'm stitching the rest of his wings on, things are likely to get turned around a lot. He might get a little squished, so they might fall off while the glue is still drying. So instead, I'm going to save that part to the very end, and I recommend you do that too. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our second wing layer, and we are going to start attaching our wings together. So center your turkey as best as you can. And this is where if you are using a pin, it can come in really helpful just to hold everything steady while you're stitching. It's going to be almost impossible to get your pin all the way through your turkey now that he's stuffed and these two layers, but you can use some of this overlap on top and just pin them together. Make sure they look the way you want, that they're lined up as centered as you can make them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch on the yellow. So all our turkey stitches are going to get hidden under the orange, but our yellow ones will now be visible on the back, which eventually will get hidden by the red. The only stitches we'll see in the very end are the stitches we'll use on the orange layer and the red layer on the back, which is inevitable, but that is okay. We can hide most of them. So what we're going to do is now we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to do a running stitch all along the edge of the yellow. And that's going to help us hold the yellow to the orange so that these two are attached. So repeat the same process as before. Go ahead and thread your needle. You can use a yellow thread to match the yellow felt, or you can use whatever color you feel like using. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to get started. I'll show you one more time how to do that running stitch. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew some of these together myself. So I want you guys to try to do the same. So I went ahead and I threaded my needle already. So it's set with my yellow thread, and we're going to start basically the same way that we started with our brown layer, and we're going to do our running stitch. The only tricky part here this time is that we have to connect this layer right here with this layer, which means some of our stitches are going to go over our little turkey body, and that's okay. So this time I'm going to start on the bottom. So I'm holding him upside down right now, and we're going to start on this bottom corner so we can get that part done with first. Because I think this is the part that's going to be the most tricky to get around for you guys. So I want to show you that part a little bit closer. So we're going to start, we got our knot, it's stuck on the back. And now my thread is on the front. So I'm going to bring my needle back through the front, and we're going to do that same exact running stitch. So we're going to bring him up from the back and through the front. And at this point, we're not going to stuff any more of our layers, so we don't have to worry too much about the size of our gaps. All right, so now we're on the brown. So it's going to be a lot thicker, and it's going to get a little bit more thick as we add more layers, but we're going to bring our thread so that it's coming up and it's going through both the orange, the yellow, and even a little bit of the brown, and that is okay. Okay. We're going to go through, and we're going to make sure we're hitting all three of our layers, and we're going to carry on just like that. We're going to keep doing that running stitch, and it can be a little hard to push the needle through when it gets through this many layers, but don't worry, you got it. Take your time, and don't worry about the yellow on the brown, because most of that will get hidden by his feet at the end anyway. Couldn't say the word feet. There you go. Just like that, same exact running stitch. Just making sure that we're getting all three of those layers. Sometimes it might have a little bit more force behind it just because it is a lot thicker, and make sure you pull it all the way through both sides. Do the best that you can. And then pull too tight, you can loosen it up a bit. Just keep going until you get through the turkey. All right, and we are just about at the end. Awesome. All right. So it's going to look a little bit something like that. So the bottom will have a little bit of multiple color thread that we'll see, but that's okay. So that at this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to continue with that running stitch all the way around the edge of our feathers so that it attaches it to the orange layer. So you can do them as big or as little as you want. These are kind of just for decoration. They are going to hold our layers together, so you do need the stitches there. Otherwise, all of your feathers will just flop around. So take your time, do your running stitch, and bring it back all the way to that starting point. So like I said, this time we're not going to stuff the layer, so you don't need to leave any gaps. If you decide you want to add more stuffing, you can stuff your wing layers with, in which case you would just do like we did with the turkey. Leave a little gap at one point once you're near the end, fill it up with stuffing, and then sew it closed. But I'm just going to leave just the turkey body stuffed on mine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue my running stitch all the way around the yellow. Once you've made it all the way around, at this point, it's just going to be more of the same. So we're going to repeat the same step. We're going to take the final feather, whichever color you made that. In my case, it's a red feather. You're going to take your pin if you're using one. If not, just hold on to it as well as you can. If you're using the pin, just pin all 3 layers together. And now this time we're going to attach the red with the orange. So we're going to attach red, orange, and yellow and our brown little turkey base all together by sewing through this orange layer. And just like before, we're going to go across the bottom so that all our layers are getting nice and snug together. And then we'll just continue our decorative stitches around the edge of the orange. So since I've already shown you how to do those running stitches multiple times now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to stitch my orange, and then I'm going to stitch the red. Now when you do get to the red layer and you're adding your decorative stitching around the edge, on the red stitching, because it's going to get attached when we attach the orange layer to the bottom, you don't really have to go beyond this point. So you can kind of just do the outer edge. You don't need to go across the bottom right here. All right, so let's get stitching. We're going to start orange or your medium layer, and then we're going to do our final layer, and then we're ready to decorate our turkey. So we've made it all the way around our turkey, so we do not need our needle or our pin anymore. Instead, I want you guys to go find that glue I told you about in the beginning, so either Elmer's glue, fabric glue, tacky glue, any kind of liquid glue, whatever you have. If you only have hot glue, make sure you have parents' permission before you use a hot glue gun though, because that can be very, very, very hot and it can burn you easily. So I'm going to use tacky glue, and at this point we're just going to decorate our turkey. So we're going to decorate it with our face and our feet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue on my eyes. There we go. He's got some dorky little eyes. And I'm going to add his beak. His little gobbler. And his feet. So go ahead, glue on all your pieces, decorate your turkey however you would like, and then we're going to come back together one more time. And after you have finished gluing all of your pieces on, your turkey is complete and it came out awesome. I hope you guys had a lot of fun making this plush turkey. Make sure you give him a good amount of time to finish drying before you start playing with him if you're going to use him as a toy though, okay? Because his glue needs to dry, otherwise some pieces may fall off. But I hope you try this out, and if you do, please send us pictures. We'd love to hear from you guys. You can tweet them at us, you can share them on Facebook using the hashtag LRWL Kids. And we would love to see if you guys try to make some of these projects. And there's a whole bunch more sewing videos, so if you're really inspired and you want to try out some new projects, new techniques, and different types of stitches, make sure to check out some of our earlier sewing videos as well. All right, until next time, bye guys!